Hi, Phil Conrad here for Computer Science 156. We are working on the front end of our Spring React application that does CRUD operations for a database table. And we have arrived at this issue, form component for commit plus tests. Let me show you what we're actually doing here. Before we even look at the issue, I want to tell you what we mean by a form component. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go into the issue just to get to the repo. I want to get to this link. Missed it. Got to the organization. Here, that's the link to the repo. And we're going to use the storybook. So this is the first time we've been building the storybook, but now we're going to start really using it. What the storybook is a collection of all the individual parts of the user interface for our application. So actually, I suppose one of the things we might want to do first is take a look at the deployed application on Doku. We created a personal dev Doku deployment earlier, and so that should hopefully still be up at, let's see, team02 dev pconred, here it is. And hopefully I can log in. And I can go to, for example, restaurants and say create restaurant. And here free birds and burritos, brah, create. Now, what that thing that we just saw, this is the form. We use the form for editing, and we use the form for creating. So if I want to create another restaurant, let's get rid of that toast message, create restaurant, and let's call it Starbucks, mediocre corporate coffee, create. There you go. So the form in this application is this. It's the thing that has all of the database fields listed, and we can either create or edit. That's what it looks like in the application. Now let's see what it looks like in the storybook. In the storybook, we have components and we have pages. Now, in truth, everything in React is a component. Our pages are also components, but we've divided it between components that are just components. They're not a full page in the web app, and pages are components that represent an entire page. And if I look under restaurants, we have a restaurant form and a restaurant table. Under dates, we have a date form and a date table. And that's going to be true of all of our database tables in this app. We have a form, and there's our restaurant form, where I can put in, free birds and burritos and click create. And here I am just working with the form itself. It is not in the context of a full web app. It is not hooked up to a back end. And what I see is that when I click create, submit was clicked with this data. That is the data that would be passed to the back end of our web application if this form were hooked up to the entire app. So it gives us a chance to test and work with this form in isolation before we try to hook it up to the whole web app. And indeed, we are working with this form we're not even hooking it up to the page yet. Now we have two versions of this form. We have the create version and we have the update version. And you can see here it is with data. The update has some data built into it. Where does that data come from? That's where those fixtures come in that we created before. We can use the fixtures to populate this with data. And we can say the habit, burgers, and fries used to be local, but now owned by Yum brands and not as tasty as before. I'm sorry, I'm editorializing when I should be teaching. Click update, and there we go. Submit clicked with data, and there is the JSON that would be submitted to the back end. I'm hoping you're beginning to get the idea of how this gives us the ability to test the different parts of our application and develop them in isolation before putting the whole thing together. It's also super useful when you have a bug in your application to figure out, is the bug in the front end? Is it in the back end? Or is it with the communication between the two? You can use Swagger to test the back end in isolation, Storybook to test the front end in isolation, And if both of those work, but you see that the data that they're submitting isn't matching, then you understand that it's an integration problem. So super useful tools. So this is what we're trying to build, just the form that will eventually be used to build the page. All right, so with that in mind, let us now go back to our Kanban board. Let me just get rid of this whole thing. And let's see, I do need to bring back that web browser. Bring that back, and I just want my Kanban board, which is here. So let's go to the Kanban board, and we will close other tabs so we can just focus on this. I'll type in my GitHub ID, so I'm only looking at my issues, and I'm going to click on this issue. All right, we did create fixtures. We did set up GitHub pages. So what do we need? We need a form called commit form visible in the storybook. That's what we're trying to create. The form should have all the fields in the database labeled with user-friendly names, suitable validations, and there's some, so we'll look at what that means. If there are date time fields, you should use a date time picker, and it says that we can find one of those on the UCSB dates form component. There should be a stories file. The PR description should have all that stuff. Implementation details. Here we go. So we need a file called commit form. This should really be commitform.js, modeled after restaurant form and UCSB dates form. And it should go under this path. So front end source main components commit. So let's go into VS Code and let's go into front end source main components. And you can see we've got all these directories, but we don't have a commit directory. So let's make a new folder. And it looks like these other ones are plural, users, dates, restaurants. So we will make commits plural. And under here, we're going to make a file, see like restaurantform.js. We will make a file commitform.js. And what we're going to put into that form is all of this stuff. But then we're going to have to edit it for our database table. So we'll copy the contents of restaurant form in. And now let's close up everything else. So let's see, close others. And let's close all of this as well. And let's just look at this. I'm going to increase the font size a bit, make it a little bit easier to read on the video. I do not want to, let's update that later. All right. At the top of a React file, you have some imports. Imports are of two kinds. You have the kinds that have the braces and the kind that doesn't have the braces. We'll come back and talk a bit more about the difference between those later. All of these, though, these are coming from React, from various parts of React. Button and form are what we're going to use to build this component. At the very outside of this is form, and you can see I can use this little thing in VS Code. There's my open tag for form. There's my close tag for form. And if I close that up, you can see that the whole file is just some imports. Then there's a function restaurant form, which we need to change that to commit form. And there are these things here, which are inside parentheses and then inside a brace. For the moment, I'm going to put this all on one line so you can just kind of see this a little better. Although when we do npm run format, it's probably going to format that back to be on multiple lines. But I wanted to just show you that what we have here is inside this parentheses, we have braces. And we have 1, 2, 3 variables separated by commas. There's an extra comma at the end. We can probably get rid of that extra comma. And one of these, button label, has a default value. We call these look like parameters to a function, but in React, they have a special name. They're called props, which is short for properties. And it is typical to put them in this set of braces. There is some stuff going on here. This is called JavaScript destructuring, but let's not get into all that right now. Just know that there's a set of braces, and there are these basically parameters to this function. One of them has a default value. What these represent, the initial contents, when we are editing when we're using this form to edit, there's going to be some initial contents in the form. So when we pass this in, we're editing. If this is empty or null, then we're creating something new. And we'll see in a minute how that impacts how the form looks. The submit action is going to be a JavaScript function that we call whenever the user presses the submit button. And then the button label by default is create, but we can override that to be edit or whatever we want. If we were building an application that had multiple languages, we could override this by passing in the word create in Spanish or French or Chinese or whatever other language. But the default is the word create in English. Now this, striker disable all, striker restore all. Just as we did when we worked with the Java code, we had a mutation testing framework called PyTest. There is a mutation testing framework for our React code called Striker. There are certain parts of the code that are really difficult to do mutation testing on. So this is our sort of get out of jail free card. But you cannot use this, you do not have carte blanche to just use this anywhere in the code that you want. There are specific places that we have agreed as a development community in our course, specific places that we've agreed it's okay to put striker exceptions. And this is one of them. This const register form state handle submit use form has a striker exception around it, and that's okay. You can't just put this anywhere that you've got a mutation coverage gap and use it to avoid writing tests. This is a special case where we are allowing it. So that's what this comment and this comment are: turn off mutation testing, turn it back on again. So I'll come back in a minute and talk more about, oops, sorry, don't mean to do that. Talk about this bit of code right here. Let's skip over that for now. Const navigate equals use navigate. This is useful because, I'll show you down here. Navigate, where do we have the navigate? Somewhere in here. Try to remember where it is. I honestly don't see it right now. But in general, use navigate allows you to move to another page when necessary. Here it is. On click, navigate -1. So this is basically the back button. When you click the cancel button, this is the cancel button, navigate -1 says, go back to the page you just came from. Works like the back button in a browser. So this navigate, const navigate equals use navigate. Anything you see in a React file that starts with use is called a hook. And there are special rules for hooks in React. Again, we won't go into all of that right now. Just want to plant the seed that that's what that is. Anything that starts with use is a hook. So use form is a hook and use navigate is a hook. Const navigate equals use navigate gives us this navigate object that we can use down here with navigate -1 so that when the cancel button is clicked, it's like hitting the back button. Let's see, what else do we have here? Test ID prefix. We're going to label a bunch of things on this form with test IDs that are going to allow us to write unit tests for this form. You see here, for example, data-test ID equals, and we have this set of braces, which is going to allow us to evaluate a JavaScript expression, test ID prefix plus, and then this string, this plus here is string concatenation. We're going to put these strings together. We're going to have restaurant form ID. Now, as you might imagine, we don't want restaurant form. We want commit form. A lot of this you will end up sort of taking on faith because if I were to explain every detail of this, it would take hours. You will pick up what you need to learn as we go along. In this video, I'm trying to give you just the highlights. Plant little seeds that will sprout later on. The more you work with the React code, the more you will understand. This is typical of how learning works with real-world software engineering, real-world code bases. If you try to understand everything about everything right from the beginning, you will get bogged down and not get anywhere. So just trust the process. That's our test ID prefix. Let's see. So far, initial content, submit action, button label equals create. Nothing here. We're changing restaurants to commit. So we just want to be sure we've changed that here. So far, so good. This is pretty much always what you will see for the ID field when it's one of these numeric IDs. You'll see it pretty much also for the things that have string IDs, like a UCSB organization. What's happening here is we're saying, first of all, this is the high-level form. The whole thing is in this open tag and this close tag. And we're saying on submit, we're going to call handle submit, and we're going to pass to handle submit this submit action, which came from whatever component was using this form. The component that uses this form is going to be a page. It's either going to be our create page or our edit page. And the submit action will be a function, some JavaScript function, a JavaScript function that communicates with the backend. Handle submit is something that comes to us from this use form hook. And the use form hook, we pass in the default values in the form are either going to be our initial contents or an empty object. So that's what this says right here. And basically the way this is written, this is a kind of weird JavaScript idiom, a way of expressing something in JavaScript. The way you evaluate this, initial contents, if it's not null, then it is going to evaluate to true, and that's what's used as the value of default values. But if it evaluates to false, we say it's falsy, then I will use the empty object, and that's what the default values will be. So this is the code that basically fills in the form with the initial contents if they're not null, otherwise fills it with an empty object. And if you don't pass in a value for initial contents, it will be undefined or null, and then you'll get the empty object. Handle submit comes back from use form, and it's the function that we wrap our action in so that it will validate all of the fields in the form and make sure that they follow all of the validations that we're going to specify later on in the file. If there are errors, we will get them back in this form state, and we'll also get this register object that we will be using to set up a lot of those validations. So this is all, you kind of have to take this on faith a little bit and follow the example, but that's at a high level what's happening here. So let's dive into this form a little bit. Here we're saying the first thing on the form, if there's initial contents, if this evaluates to true, then we do this. This initial contents and followed by this parentheses, you can treat it sort of like an if-else, but it's a functional if-else that returns a value. So think of it as if initial contents is true, then this. And what is this? This is the thing that shows the ID field. And so the form group is the outer part of this. Inside we have a label ID, and we're saying that this is the HTML for the ID field. This ID needs to match this ID. Register is registering with this use form hook the name of this field, which is ID. Its value is going to be whatever the ID is in the initial contents, and it's going to be disabled. We're not allowed to edit the ID field. So that's what's going on here. Let's close up this and look at this next one. This next form group, you can see goes all the way from here to here. This is going to be the name. So we've got the name. Now, our commit doesn't have a name field. What fields does it have? Well, this is where it's useful to open up another window here and go look at our fixtures. So our commit fixtures, what do we have? We have message URL, author login, and commit time. So let's start changing this name to message. So this is going to be message. This is going to be message. This is going to be message. ID equals name. This is going to be message. Type equals text. That is true. It's a text field. Is invalid is going to be Boolean of errors dot message. This is one that people often forget to change. We're going to register message. And is message a required field? Yes, it is. So what we say is required, and then this is the message. Sorry, we're using the message in two different senses here. This is what's going to show on the screen if I don't put in a value for message. Do I want to have a max length? Actually, I don't think I do. So I'm going to take out, sorry, that keeps popping up. I'm going to take out this max length because I don't really want to have a max length from my message. I want to let it be, although I believe our database might have a max length of 255. So maybe I will go with max length 255. Yeah, sure, why not? So we'll do that, and then that errors dot not name, but message. Now, here's something you have to be real careful about. The word message here it stays because this is actually the error message, but this message is the name of our field. Yes, it be like that sometimes. So we have to be careful here a little bit. But I believe we got that one right, and we'll check in a minute. So let's see, we've got that one. Now let's see, what else do we have? We have a URL. We'll change description to URL. So let's change description to URL, 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 URL is required. And there we go. Description, that should be URL, and we're good. Now, we still have author login and commit time to put in, but let's just, for now, let's just work with those two fields and see if we can get this working, and then we'll come back and add in the other two fields. I think that is a better strategy than trying to do it all at once. So now what else do we have there? We have submit. The rest of this, I think, stays just as it is. We don't need to make any changes, except down here. Instead of exporting default restaurant form, we're going to export default commit form. So there it is. Now the question is, well, what can we do with this? Well, this doesn't appear anywhere in our app yet. So the only way we can work with it is by adding it to our storybook. So to do that, we are going to need to go down to stories. And under components, just like we created a directory up here under main components for commits, you can see under here we have main components, commits, nav, profile, restaurants, UCP dates. Under stories components, we're going to need a directory or a folder for commits. And if we look under restaurant, you can see we've got restaurant form stories. We're going to have a similar file called commit form stories. So let's change this to commit form stories. And now we're going to need to edit this file. So let's close up everything except commit form stories. So let's close others. And let's walk through this. So at the top, import React, import not restaurant form this time, but commit form. Now this gives us a chance to, by the way, the reason it's gray is that so far we're not using this. In fact, it even says right there, declared, but its value is never read. It's never used. So it will be before we're done, but if it were not, that would be an error. Now, are we importing this from main components restaurant form? No, we're importing this from main components commit form. Now, is it commits plural? It is commits plural. There we go. Main components commits. And we're importing commit fixtures from fixtures, commit fixtures. Now, I showed you that there is this braces thing and then this not braces thing. And what's the difference? Well, the difference is that if I look at the commit form, actually, let's go back over and look at commit form. Where is commit form? Here. At the bottom, we have export default commit form. When you do export default, you don't put the braces on. But if I look at commit fixtures, I just do export without the word default. So I do put the braces on. Now you're probably wondering why? Let's not get into that right now. Right now, it's enough to understand that that is the difference. Default exports don't take the braces. Regular exports do take the braces. And we'll just, again, accept that on faith for right now. Now, in this, what are we doing? We're exporting default, not this object and its components, not components restaurants, but components commits, commit form. And the component that we're exporting is commit form. This title is how it's going to show up and the menu levels that it's going to show up under in our storybook. And then this is the thing that's going to show up. So we always have this template, and we start by just putting in the name of our form here, return commit form. And then we've got two stories here. We've got a create story and an update story. So in our create story, we have this submit action. Submit was clicked with data. We really don't have to change anything here. In our update, here, initial contents. We want the initial contents. Now notice, initial contents, button label, submit action. These things here inside these args correspond to, if I bring back the commit form, they correspond to the properties. Initial contents, submit action, button label. Initial contents, button label, submit actions. The order is not important, but the names have to match exactly or it won't work. So that's what we're passing in. In a real use of this form, the submit action would talk to the back end and would talk to all those Swagger endpoints that we created. But in the case of a storybook, we just throw some messages on the console and on the window that give us some debugging information about how the component is behaving. I believe that the only thing we have to change here is that our initial content should not be a restaurant from the restaurant fixtures. Oh, by the way, notice this square bracket here. Previous video, we talked about how the restaurant fixtures and the other fixtures are inconsistent. In one case, it's an array. In one case, it's an object. This example comes from the one with an array. Let's look at that again. In the restaurant fixtures, notice that one restaurant is an array, and that's why we're indexing 0 here. But our fixtures, if we look at the commits fixtures, it's simply an object. So we are not going to index. We are going to say that our initial contents is simply commit fixtures dot one commit. There it is. All right, so now we have our story, and what we should be able to do is come over here to our front end and say npm run storybook, and with luck, we will get a storybook, and we have commits here. We have a commit form. Hey, look, it has message and URL, and if I put in PC, this is a commit, and URL, https, github.com, foobar, and click create. Submit was clicked with data, message, and URL. That's great. We just need to add our 2 other fields, and we're in good shape. Hey, how about, that was create. How about update? Does update work? Hey, look, update works. It pulled from my fixture. And if I click update, submit was clicked. And if I click cancel, nothing really happens because there's no page to go back to. we'll test that at a later stage. All right, so far so good. This is looking pretty good. Um, let's Control C out of here, and we can go ahead and do git status. We can go ahead and do a commit, git add dot, get status. I definitely want to do a get status because I want to see exactly what we're pulling in here. So I'll do git commit -m. Now notice I'm still on PC commit fixtures as my branch. It would be bad if I did another commit to that branch because there is an open pull request for that branch. So phew, save just in time, git checkout -b PC commit form. And we're going to do a get commit -m PC. I'm going to say work in progress because this is not yet finished, but it is a work in progress. I have 2 of the 4 fields for the commit form plus a story. And I will leave a blank line and I'll say still TBD tests, or first of all, finish the other 2 fields on the form and write tests. So that we call this a work in progress commit because I'm not really done with this, but I'm noticing the time pretty soon. I'm going to have to pause this video and continue it later because it's going to be time for class tonight. So I don't know if I'll get it through all of this before it's time to go to class, but I do want to make sure that I get a commit in. So I've got my commit in. We're going to see that it does not have test coverage, so it will show up as a test coverage. You know, it'll get flagged that it doesn't have test coverage. It'll get flagged that we don't have mutation test coverage. But at least I will be able to begin to see my storybook take shape. We were able to run it here. And again, npm run storybook is the way you run it locally. And it comes up on localhost 6006. So that's helpful. We also, we probably should have done this before we committed. We should have done npm run format. And if I do a get status, oh, it sure did change that commit form. So there will, the commit that I just pushed, you know, if I did a pull request on it, it would fail, but we didn't do a pull request yet, so that's fine. I'm going to do a get, oh, actually, let's also do npx ESLint --fix dot and see, okay, no problem so far. So I'll do a get status. I'll do a get add dot, get commit -m PC, work in progress, fix formatting, get push origin PC commit form. All right, so what have we done so far? We have created a form that has 2 of the fields that we want, 2 of the 4 fields, and we created the storybook entry. What we now need to do is finish the other 2 fields. So let's go back into VS Code and go back to our commit form. Here it is. We have our message, we have our URL, and down here is the button. And then right here is where we're going to put in the other 2 fields. So let's remind ourselves of our fixtures. The other 2 fields are going to be author login and commit time. Author login is just going to be another string field. So for that one, we can pretty much just take our URL form group. Oops, again, I hate that. Take our URL form group, copy, paste, and now we've got URL in there twice. I will change URL to, let's see, what would we call it? We want the name to be exactly the same, author login. So we'll start here. And this time I will actually use a search and replace to try to make sure that I do this properly. And I'm going to go one at a time, URL to author login. I'm going to put my cursor there and look for the next one. There it is. That's the one that's going to change. I click this button. I don't want to do this because that will change all of them in the file, and I don't want to change the ones up here. So I'll go one at a time. And now I have to be a little bit careful because here I want that. I don't want it to look like that. This is the label, so I want it to be like that. I want it to be formatted nicely the way I want it to show up on the screen. So we want to be a little bit careful. This one, author login like that is perfectly fine. Author login, author login, author login. And again, here, author login is required. I probably want to format this because this is a message for humans. Author login is required. Go to the next one. There it is. Change that. And it has wrapped around again. So now I have my author login field. So what I probably should do is come back over here and do npm run storybook again, just to make sure that it looks okay. So I look under commits, commit form, and yep, author login looks fine. And I'll just put some text in there. That looks fine. So I will continue. And the next thing I want is a date field. So for a date field, I'm going to go look at UCSB dates and look at my UCSB date form. And I'm going to see that I've got some stuff in here for a date. Now, there's a few ways that you can do a date. You could enter the date as text, and then you could use one of these regular expressions to format the date. That's one approach. You could also use a date picker element, and I think that's going to be a better approach. So I'm going to pause the video and pull up some resources about a date picker, and we're going to try that approach instead of doing it with a text field and then see how this is. Let's see if we've got the local date time. So yeah, instead of doing this with the ISO date regex, let's see if we can do this with a date picker, because I think that's going to give us a better value. I'm a little concerned, like, is that going to give us a value that has the time zone on it? We might have to do some sort of transformation of the data, like when we get it at the other side, to add the time zone on. We'll see. But yeah, let's pause the video and see what we can do to do something a little bit better than this for our local date time. And just to be clear what I'm talking about, if I look at the UCSB date form, let's go ahead and look at that. And is this still working? Let's see. I think it is. UCSB date form. Right. So this is, well, actually, this is a date picker. So this, you know what? Maybe we will just go with this. Maybe we'll just go with this. The thing is, we want it to come with a time zone. And so I'm not quite sure if that's going to work, but we will see. Now, let's see if I had left this out. Please enter valid date and time. Yes, so it is checking. And there we go. All right, so let's see what we can do with that. So I take it back. We're going to go back and we're going to go ahead and use this. So this is our date time. Now, one thing also to notice is that this particular form has some extra stuff on it that we didn't see before. It has row and column. That is just some extra HTML here, really JSX, but HTML, we'll call it HTML, that allows us to lay out things on the form a little bit more nicely in rows and columns. We're not going to worry about that for right now. We are just going to take this form group, and I can sort of close that up and then select the whole thing. This is the form group, I believe, make sure. Yes, for our local date time. So we're going to grab that, go over to our commit form, and we're going to put that in, and we're going to put it in here between URL and our, oops, no, I'm going to put after author login. I want to put it right here. Now, let's format that, and let's see, local date time. This is actually going to be, if I look again at my fixtures for commits, this is commit time. So instead of local date time, let's call this commit time, and we will call this commit time in ISO format with time zone. And let's see. Test ID is UCSB date form hyphen local date time. But actually what we want is test ID prefix plus, and not local date time, but commit time. ID is commit time. Type date time hyphen local. So this form control has a date time local. Maybe what we want is a date time with a time zone. So what we need to do is look up this form.control and the type and see what the values are. So this form.control, where does it come from? It comes from React Bootstrap. This form here, React Bootstrap. So let's go to a web browser and go to React Bootstrap. And we need to make sure that we're on the right version. I believe that we are using Bootstrap 5. I think that's the right version. We want to look at components and we want to look at forms. Here we go. And form controls. And here is a form group. Here's form control. And let's see. What we really want to do is look at this type on form.control. So let's see if we can find on form.control, form controls, we want the type and sort of look through here. Read only, file input, color, form control. And do we have type? Type, the HTML, which is only relevant if as is input, the default. All right, that's fine. But what are the valid values for type? It does not tell us. That's very frustrating. So let's try going to, let's just do a search and say, well, actually, this is probably as good a time as any to ask ChatGPT. So let's indeed try ChatGPT, and I will log in with my UCSB ID here because I do have an account. And let's see. When using React Bootstrap 5 and using the form.control, what value should I use for type if I have a date time with a time zone? And let's see. Okay, date time local, notice, does not support time zone selection. All right, well, we knew that. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's suggesting that there are some possibilities here. If you need the time zone of the file value, you may convert the selected date time and time zone into a standardized format for backend submission. I think that's what we're going to need to do. I think we're going to need to take the, just go ahead and use the date time local and stick the letter Z on the end because that will stick the time zone on it. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to go back over here and we are going to just keep it as date time local. And we're going to keep everything just like this, except for errors.localDateTime will be errors.commitTime. And we're going to register commit time. And we're going to say commit time is required. Oops. And I'm also going to say commit time instead of ISO format. I'll say ISO format. I'm just going to say commit time in UTC, which is that Z stands for Coordinated Universal Time. We talked about this actually in the previous videos in this series. So the Z at the end, and we're going to have to figure out a way to get that Z on there before we transmit it to the back end. So we will figure that out in a moment. But first of all, let's see if we've just got the time on here. Commit time, date time local, errors, commit time. That Z might create a problem when the data comes in. Okay, errors.local commit time. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by trying to do two things at once. Um, I'm thinking about the fact that we use initial contents. What we might need to do is actually do some surgery on the initial contents to remove the Z from the one field when it comes in from our fixtures or from the database. We'll talk about how to do that a little bit later. But for right now, let's see if we have a form that works here. So we will come over here and we will do npm run storybook. ISO date regex is not defined. So it was in fact running the storybook the whole time, because when you do npm run storybook, it just continually runs the storybook. And there it is. There's our error. ISO date regex is not defined. And the reason is because we copied that code, if we go back over here, into our commit form from the date form. And in the date form, so let's go into main components, UCSB dates, UCSB date form. This right here is a regular expression, and it's super complicated. I am not going to try to explain it. There we go. That's where we got it from. So we got a regex for ISO dates, and we are citing our source, but we have to declare this in our file as well. So let's go back over to, okay, I'm a little lost here. There it is. That's where we need to put this. We need to put this up at the top. We need to just declare that variable. Hopefully this now works. So let's give it a try. Let's try running storybook again. We have commits. We have our commit form. And all right, so let's try. Here is foo bar fum and a commit time. We will select. Oh, I hate this. You have to click over here to select. So there's a date, and then we'll put in 12:45 p.m. create. And you can see that the commit time doesn't have the Z on the end of it. So we may need to manually add the Z, add some logic, and we'll have to figure out how to do that. Let's look at update. So update, you can see the commit time did not come in, and it probably didn't come in because it doesn't have the Z on it. So that is the next thing we're going to have to address. But let's go ahead and make a work in progress commit and come down here and say get status, get add dot, get commit minus MPC, work in progress on commit form. And I'll say down here in the detail, we need to remove the Z. No, we need to add the Z for the time zone on create and remove it and edit. We also need to remove the Z on that we get from the back end when filling in the initial contents. And there's our commit, get push origin PC commit form. And so this is a good point to pause. So I'm going to pause the video, and when we come back, we will take care of figuring out how to add that extra bit of code in. So we'll pause here. All right, I'm going to, I've thought about it a bit, and I think the strategy we're going to use is that for adding the Z, we're going to do that actually in the submit action, which is going to be actually at the page level. So we're not going to worry about adding the Z, but we do need to strip away the Z. And here's how we can do that. We are filling default values right now with initial contents. But one of the things that we can do instead is we can say that default values is going to be an object that is going to be all of initial contents, but then, and that's what this syntax means, it'll be a new object that has all of initial contents, but then we are going to substitute for the value of commit time, we are going to take commit time dot, and now what I need to do is find the JavaScript method to take a string and do a string substitution, right? So let's go look up well, yeah, we still have ChatGPT open, we do. Let's just ask in JavaScript, where's here, there we go. In JavaScript, how do I do a string replace? In JavaScript, you can replace parts of a string using the .replace method. There we go. So we're going to do, move this out of the way, commit time dot replace z with nothing. And what this does, it says, take everything in, make a new object with everything that's in initial contents, but then take commit time. And actually, this should probably be initial contents dot commit time, replace the z with nothing. And hopefully that will strip off that z that is causing this to not work. Let's see if that is indeed the case. So we're going to do npm run storybook. And we have commits. And what we're looking at is the update. And sure enough, it works. It works. If you recall, before I did this, the commit time, it wasn't going into the form. And the reason is that it wasn't a valid time because it was expecting a time, ISO date time that didn't have the time zone on the end of it. Since all of these times for git commits are expressed using the Z for the time zone, just stripping off the Z fixes it. We will add the Z actually at a different part of the application. That'll just be easier than trying to wedge it in here. So I think we've got our basic form written, and we've got our storybook entry written. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do a get status. I'm going to do a get add, get status. Oops, all right, try that again, get status. I should have, and I didn't do, npm run format. And I should do an npx ESLint -- fix dot, both from the front end directory. Now do a get status, and it did change the formatting a bit, so I'll do a get add dot again, and do a get commit -m pc, strip off z for time zone when populating commit form with existing commit. Say we will need to add it back in for create and update in another part of the code base. There we go. Get push origin PC commit form. What is left to do for us is to write the tests. So how do we write the tests? We are going to want to use the example tests from one of our other, we've been basing this off of restaurants. So if we go into main and we close up components, close up main, close up stories, here is tests, and we see we have the same directory structure. So we're going to add a folder here for commits. Let's look under restaurants. There's restaurant form test. We are going to want under commits, not restaurant form test, but rename commit form.test. So we've got a lot of work to do in this file because there's a lot of tests. First thing I like to do is take everything except for the first test and initially and just comment it out. So we can work on one test at a time and get one test at a time to pass. So there is everything except our first test. And we've got a lot to talk through here as well to understand like how this whole thing works. And I guess another thing to show you is that now that I've commented out everything except for this first test, some of these imports are gray, and it's not going to like that. It really does not want to have anything that is an unused variable. But there's a hack. What I can do is take these and put an underscore in front of them. And when I do that, then it does not complain that I'm not using those variables. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing I'm going to do is import restaurant form. No, this should be import commit form from main components commits, commit form. That one's still gray, but that will change as soon as I change this down here to commit form. Renders correctly with no initial contents. That is fine. And I'm going to basically expect create to be in the document. And expected headers. My expected headers are actually going to be the ones that are on my form. Again, this is not restaurant form tests, but commit form tests. And instead of restaurant fixtures, I want commit fixtures from fixtures, commit fixtures. There we go. And let's see. And actually, for the time being, that's going to need an underscore because we're not using it yet. And my expected headers. If I look at my commit form, so let's go back to the commit form. Under main components commits, commit form. What do I have? Well, I've got ID, message, URL, author login, and commit time in UTC. This is the one that I'm going to copy because it's the one that's going to be hardest to remember. Let's go back to my test. Where did my other file go? There's all this stuff in the way. Let's get escape to cancel. There we go. All right. I want to go to commit form. So commit time in UTC. What else do we have? We have, no, not commit time. We have URL. We have author login, and we have message. So this is a list of strings, or an array of strings, if you will. It's the expected headers. What happens here is I render the form with no initial contents, and I look to make sure that create is in the document because it's the default. And then I go through this expected headers.for each. What I have here is a lambda function. This is the parameter to the function. This is the body of the function. And I'm going to call this function for each element in my array. I'm going to pass in message, then URL, then author login, then commit time. I'm going to look for it on the screen and expect it to be in the document. That's my test. How do I run this test? Well, I come over here and I do npm test. And my test failed. Cannot read properties of undefined reading commit time. Oh, that is because here, didn't anticipate that. So this code that we did over here, in order to replace the initial contents, there's a bit of a problem with it. And the problem is that, let's come over back to commit form. It is trying to evaluate this, even if initial contents is empty. So that is not going to work for us. That is not going to work for us. we didn't actually test this. We tested this code with edit, but we didn't test it with create. And this is not going to work. So we need to come up with a different way of doing this. So let me see if I can figure out how are we going to make this work. I think possibly one thing we can try is we can try this. We can try const default values equals initial contents question mark. And if initial contents is valid, then we will go with this. Otherwise, we will go with that. And then we will say use form default values. And here's a cool thing is inside this braces here, if we just say use form with default values, that is the same in JavaScript as going default values colon default values. So since the variables are the same, we don't need to specify. Let's do npm run format on that. Oh, look, it passed our test. It is continuously running the test even as we are like changing the code. So that passes the test. But let's also see what happens when we do npm run storybook. npm run storybook. Here's create. That seems to be okay. And if I put in A, B, C, and then select a date and time, that works. And if I go to update, this also works. All right, excellent. So we fixed that, and npm test, that first test is passing. So what we'll do now is we will go over to our commit form test, and we will uncomment the next test. So let's uncomment the next test. And this says renders correctly when passing in initial contents. So not restaurant form, but commit form. And we're going to pass in initial contents, not from restaurant fixtures one restaurant, but we're going to pass in commit fixtures dot one commit. Now, you may recall that commit fixtures dot one commit was, wait, what did you mean? What is it saying? Did you mean? Oh, right, because I have to take out the underscore. There we go. Okay. Restaurant fixtures was in an array, so I'm a little wondering if this is going to work or if we need to put this in an array. We'll find out, I suppose. Anyway, we're going to render this, and not quite sure why that comma is there. That looks suspicious. We're going to render this, and then we're going to wait for create to be in the document, and then we're going to see if all the headers are there. And then, oh, we need to uncomment this last part of it. We're going to wait for test ID to be in the document and expect ID to be in the document. So test ID, did we change our test ID up here? Test ID, restaurant form, we did not. We need to change that to commit form. All right, so let's try this second test. Oh, look, it's just already running for us because it just runs continuously. And every time we change the code, it runs the test. 2 of our tests have passed. All right, let's try running our third test. I'm going to uncomment this and show you that it already ran the test. And it's like, hey, I don't know about restaurant form. What the heck is that? So we'll change that to commit form. And what it's going to try to do is click the cancel button, and it's going to try to make sure that when we do the cancel button, that it does the right thing. Notice these little things. That is because we did this. So let's change those back to what they should be. And let's look and see, we're just moving right along with our tests. Um, test that the correct validations are performed. So this one's going to be a little bit more tricky, but I think we can probably get it done pretty fast. Not restaurant form, but commit form. And we're going to wait for create to be in the document, and we're going to click the create button. And it should tell us that name is required, but not name. It should tell us that, let's see, what else? What do we have on here? Message is required. URL is required. What else is required? Author login is required. And maybe also commit time. That's what we would expect. And then let's see, we're looking here. I see, this is actually checking that the max length 30 characters comes up. We did this on our which one? Was it the commit message where we put in a length restriction? It was max length 255 characters. So what we're going to do is we're going to make one of these with 256 characters. This is repeating the A 256 times. And we're going to put that in not for the name, but for the message. So this will be message input. Message input. And fire the submit button. And we expect max length 30 characters. Not 30 characters, but 255 characters to be in the document. Haha, all of our tests pass. NPM test. Super awesome deal. All right, so get status, get add dot get status. We need to do our NPM run format and get status and get add dot. Let's also do npx eslint -- fix dot get status, get commit -mpc add tests for commit form, get push origin PC commit form. At this point, I think we are ready for a pull request. So let's go over to our repo. And commit form had recent pushes. PC add form for commits. In this PR, we add a form for the commits table. This only adds the form to the storybook. It is not yet integrated into the app. To access the storybook, use this link. And what I will do is I will open this in a new tab. I will go here. I don't have this link yet because we haven't done the pull request yet, but in a minute, it will build the storybook for my specific pull request. And then I will be able to put this in the description, and I'll say to do add link to storybook. And I will also add to do add screenshot of form. So create pull request. And so now what we need to do is wait. This is going to go through, and one of the things this will do, this 55 chromatic PR, it's going to create the storybook link on the website for the course, the website for the course, for the website for this repo, and then I can paste it in to my my PR. I also should add in, if we go back to projects, my issue is number 92. So let's go back to the repo. Oops. Yep. Oh, keep clicking in the wrong spot. Okay. I believe I said 92. So we're going to go in and say edit, uh, closes number 92, which means that if and when we merge this pull request, that issue is taken care of. All right, and so now we're just waiting on all this to run through, and chromatic PR 55, chromatic PR 55. Hopefully, in just a minute, we will have. Oh, some checks were not successful. PR mutation testing. Oh no. All right. Well, we will have to figure that out. So we will pause the video for a moment because it is now time for class. And I will finish recording this video after class tonight. So we will look at this PR mutation testing. How do we, first of all, how can we see what is wrong, like what actually failed? And then how do we go about addressing it? So we will look at that later. Also, UI review. Two changes must be accepted as baselines. Let's take a look at that right quick. If I click on details, I see over here that there are some changes. And what are the changes? Well, it's some new things in the app. We created a new form. And are we happy with this form? And the answer is yes, yes, we are. So we will move this out of the way. We click on accept. And here's our update. Are we happy with this one? We'll click accept. So that's something that we need to do every time there's a visual change in the application. So if we now go back and look at our pull request again, we still have the red X for mutation testing, but our chromatic, okay, let's see, review the new updated UI. Click here and let's see, review now. Approve PR yourself. We will say, sure, we're approving that. And great. So hopefully now, if we go back, we now have PC commit fixtures. No, that's not the one we want. We want commit form. There it is. And here's our storybook. And here is our commit form. And so now that we've got a commit form, we can copy this URL and we'll go back to our, let's see, I want github.com and I want to go to team02 F2400. What? No, team02. Team02. There it is. And go to my pull request, add form for commits, and edit. Use this link. And now that I've got that in there, that link should take me to the storybook. And now I can also make a screenshot of this. And put that screenshot in here. So I'll say screenshots. And I'll say this is for create. And I'll update the comment. And then I will also add a screenshot of the update. And this just makes it nice for the people reviewing your pull request. They can see immediately, like, what is it that you're going for here? So here is a screenshot of my, let's get my zoom control out of the screenshot. I'll make a screenshot here of this, and I'll go back into my pull request, edit, and this is update, paste that in. And now I have screenshot of my create, of my update, link to the storybook. That's what we like to see. So the only thing we have left to do, everything is green except for the mutation testing. So we will address that I think I'm actually going to make a separate video for that. So we will end this video here so that we can upload it, and we will take care of that one, the mutation testing, in a separate video. So thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.